Hi everybody, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I rave and rant about board games, but usually more the ranting part. This time it should be quite a small video because we're going to quickly talk about the expansion that has just come out for Heat. Talked about the last one, I've talked about Heat in detail at my top 50 and as a full review, but now we have Tunnel Vision, so this is the newest map pack effectively for it. Gives you a new couple of maps, a new few, bunch of cards, the ability to now play with 8 players. Is this worth your cash? Well, let me give you some details.
Let's see if you bastards can do 90.
Right, well let's get the obvious one out of the way. You can now play as purple! Yay, you've now got purple, if that's your favourite colour, which for some reason seems to be more popular a colour than I gave it credit for. But yep, you got a purple car, purple gear stick, purple race cards, and a purple board. This isn't exactly a game I'm that desperate to play with 8 players. I wasn't that desperate to play it with 7 players, frankly. 6 is kind of the cap I want to do. But at least this does mean that if I want to play it with 6 players again, I can take out, was it black and grey? Are they 2 colours in the previous set? So, yeah, we can take out the boring colours and at least now have purple and orange instead. But yeah, if you want to play it with 8, you can play it with 8. So if you've only got this one and you haven't got heavy rain yet, you'll play it with 7. But I mean, that's basically all that is. It's just another player colour. Take it if you want it. You know, it's more stuff. Okay, so the main things that you're probably going to want to talk about is A, does it fit in the box? And B, what have we got in terms of the cards and the boards? Now, this will not fit in the main box if you have heavy rain as well. You are going to have box lift, that is just going to happen. So what I have done is I've kept this expansion box and now this one holds the boards for heavy rain and this one in it. Then you can get everything else into the main box set, which is fine, but yeah, you're not going to be able to pile all these boards on top of each other in that big box and still have it, be snug, in future. That's just something you're going to have to deal with. But, one expansion box is not that big a deal. But you get essentially a few championship sponsor cards and event cards and that just to bolster up those decks, nothing particularly major. The 2 main things are the boards and the new mechanic garage cards. I've started using these a lot more often in games, even when I'm teaching it, because frankly, it just makes the game so much better. And here you get a bunch of front wings. Now, these front wings have got different values on them. Sometimes it's just a plus, sometimes it's like 6, 2, 4, 3, whatever. But the main thing is that they introduce a mechanic called drafting. Not drafting as with cards, no. This is drafting in terms of vehicles. Effectively, it's like a weird kind of free movement you can get. When you play one of these cards, or even a combination of them, you add up all the amounts on the draft symbols, and what happens is when you have moved your car, this will not count as speed towards your movement, but you basically get to move additional spaces forward, providing the spaces do not have any cards in them whatsoever. And then on top of that, you can even slipstream if you happen to be behind someone else. It's a really good way to just speed along straights. Not so much corners, because people tend to be bunched up and you tend to not be able to draft easily. But on a long straight, you combine this with a good slipstream bit, even one of the weather conditions, and you can just zoom along with these. These are pretty powerful, to say the least. I mean, they are sort of sought after. They get picked a lot after explaining them. And they've even got a few effects from other expansion stuff on there. So you can discard and redraw a bunch of cards on top of everything. You can look through your discard and put something back. You've got plus it's just speed cornering. So they do a few other things besides the draft. But yeah, it's a new mechanic that's pretty easy to teach when you use it, so just mix it in with your other garage cards and just be glad that you've got so many of the wretched things. It's insane how much variety is in there now. Alright, the main event, the 2 boards. We have got, here we go, let's unveil the lot. We have got Spain, or Spania basically, and the Netherlands. So let's tackle Netherlands first, alright? So I quite like Netherlands as a place. I've been there a couple of times, or driven through it, I suppose is more accurate. But suffice to say, your track, I'm sorry to say, is a little bit on the boring side, if we're going to be perfectly honest. It's a standard, 6 heat, free stress, but it's got a free lap requirement. So you actually go around this 3 times, because it's not that long a track. You've only got 55 spaces on it and 5 corners. But if you look at it, it's not that much different, really, from something like USA, really, from the base set. It's a pretty straightforward thing. You've got 5 corners, none of which are particularly hard to go round. I mean, you've got a 3 and a 4, 2 5s and an 8. You haven't got any 2s or massive tight ones. All you have on this track that's unique is chicanes, which we already had in Heavy Rain. 1 chicane, and the chicane is a 5 followed by a 5, which then is fairly followed by a 3. So you've basically got this sort of wavy S-bend at one part, And then the rest of it is just big long straight, little corner, straight, all the way around back to the chicane. That's it. That's kind of it. And this disappoints me with Heavy Rain as well as this one. We already have a track similar to this in terms of its simplicity. It's called USA. And the 4 base maps were just base maps. Different types of corners, different types of straights. That's what they were supposed to be. But Heavy Rain did this, and so is this one, where it introduces a new mechanic. We'll get onto this one's quirk in a minute. And it only does it for one of the 2 tracks. So you end up with 6 fairly standard tracks, and then 2 tracks, if you've got both expansions, with the cool new addition. Why didn't they put the cool new addition from this on both of these tracks? The same with Heavy Rain. Why didn't they put the quirk with that one, the wet patches, on both the tracks? It just seems like a missed opportunity. And so what you're kind of left with here is a map that's a little bit more interesting to do than USA, but that's kind of it. Was it really worth a map pack to do it? It's got some pretty tulips on it, and it's being 3 laps. I mean, you know, the game takes comparatively as long as a 2-lap race with more spaces, so it's not like any bigger or shorter. But yeah, that's it. You get a chicane, and that's it. That's all you get for the Netherlands. I wish I could be a bit more excited about this map. You know, it's not terrible, but it's nothing particularly fancy either. I mean, you know, expansions are meant to give you something a bit different, and this one, apart from one small chicane, doesn't really give you anything that different. It's just, yeah, a little bit lacking. Oh well, let's see if Sane can do any better, and yes it can. Quite considerably, actually. Whoop, here we go. So, this is the dark map, the dark black map. Now, the last one had 55 spaces on it and was 3 laps. This one has 109 spaces on it. You only go round once. This is a 1-lap track with 11 corners. This is basically a massive weavy thing. I mean, you're starting down here and you're going, what was it? Yeah, going this way. So, wee all the way around this massive ton of track until you get to the back. 1 lap only. So, if anything, this actually makes this a sort of slightly quicker game than most, because the other one was 55 spaces, but 3 laps. So you're technically going over 165 spaces when you go through that. Well, this is 109. You only go around it once, so technically this track is shorter. But the main twist with this one is you've got a lot of corners. And they're not particularly easy corners either. The highest value is 5. They go as low as 2, and they go at 2 at several locations. But you've even got chicanes on top of that to make things worse. But here's the tricky bit with this, and well, sorry, the twist with it, the twisty bit with this. And I actually quite like this one, actually. I think this one's a little bit more interesting than the Rain one from Heavy Rain. I like that one fine, but this one has tunnels. So when you go through the dark spaces for these tunnels, you're not allowed to discard cards in your hand. You have to basically stick with what cards you've got in your hand by the time you enter the tunnel until you come out of the tunnel. Now, the tunnels range in terms of their length. I mean, what have they got here? 8 spaces, 9 spaces, 5 spaces, 4 spaces, 10 spaces. So they do range in length. So you might literally spend 1 turn going in one out and out the other. It might not make a difference. But I like the idea that you're stuck with the hand you've got. I mean, if you go into a tunnel and your hand is full of heat cards, you're in a bit of trouble. So you've almost got to plan your hand in advance of going in the tunnel, go through the tunnel, and then hope you can get some decent cards when you come out the other side. But it also just influences what speed cards you're going to have. Because if you've got a bunch of low values before you go in, you're going to go through this tunnel at snail's pace. But you might want to save up some high value speed cards for the tunnel. Problem is, some of the tunnels have got corners. I mean, there's a tunnel here with 8 spaces and a 2 limit on it. So suddenly, yeah, that might force you to go around the tunnel like at high speed, generate some heat, or you're going to have to go at snail's pace through this tunnel. And that is why this one can take maybe a little bit longer than 109 spaces would lead you to believe, because you'll probably spend a decent amount of turns going through the various tunnels. But still, I found this one to be a quicker map than others, you know, especially if you've got some people that will go crazy with their heat generation and just like, you know, no fear, no fear attitude. But overall, the map is a pretty decent one. It's easy enough to teach. It's only that 1 extra rule plus the chicane, and you can get through it in a reasonable amount of time. But I quite like this one. I prefer this one to the Japan map, actually. You know, the Japan one's fine with those water spaces, but this one I find more interesting. It's more amusing with the tunnels. So, yeah, pretty decent on that front. And of course, you're probably wondering, what is this game like to play with 8 players? Well, A lot of that does depend on what type of players you've got. If you've got players who know this game and they know the rules, you can actually still get through it in a reasonable amount of time, especially as most of it is simultaneous, and it does lead to a lot of cluster craziness in the corners. I mean, if you're in similar situations, 6 of you, let's say on average about 5 or 6 of you on similar playing fields, trying to all go around the corners does lead to a lot of slipstream moments. But your games are going to get longer, and if you've got new people to the game, they're probably going to get trashed by everybody else in terms of the race. They'll be at the back somewhere, and they may slow the game down, but 8 is definitely going to be maybe like an event-style game. I mean, honestly, I can play it with 8. I'd rather cap it at 6, and you could always just use the AI cards to, beef up the player count a little bit. But I tend to want to bring out a social deduction game, and I've got something like 7 or 8 players. I still would probably want to cap this at 6, but if you've got the people, if you want to play this at a convention, say, this is brilliant for conventions if you've got 8 of you, then by all means go ahead. There's no skin on my teeth. So yeah, there's not really much else to say. You've got 2 maps, you've got an 8th player and a few extra cards. For the amount of money you spend on these expansions, I wouldn't say it was the greatest of value, especially if you didn't really desperately need another player component set. But I do wish that they would use the cool twist on both maps. This is annoying. We've got 6 maps with basic rules other than chicanes, and we've only got 2 maps with this cool tricksy element, one with the water patches for Japan and one for the tunnels with Spain. Why can't we have more? Why give us Netherlands with such a boring layout compared to Spain? Why not have 2 of them? I don't get it. It's a missed opportunity, and it just feels kind of lazy. So these expansions are cool if you want to expand your heat and your heat game and just have more variety. That's all cool, but yeah, they do feel like they're just taking the easy route. They're playing it safe, and I want them to take a few more risks with it. So the expansion is okay. I'd probably give it overall, if you're going to get one or the other, Heavy Rain or this one, I probably prefer this one to Heavy Rain. I think this map is more interesting than the Japan one, but still the value and the fact that it is just basically here's another player and another couple of boards, one of which is not as good. The other secondary board on the Heavy Rain one is probably more interesting than the other ones on here, so it's pick your poison. I give it a 7 out of 10 overall. It's good, and I do recommend it if you want to get some more variety from your heat game, but don't jump into this thinking, oh yeah, this is a fantastic expansion, and the same goes for Heavy Rain. They are nice expansions to beef the variety in your game. No way are they essential. You could happily just keep the base set and have nothing else on top of that, and you'd be fine. It's just, do you want more player sets? Do you want more maps? That's basically the way it goes.
How hard can it be?
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Let me know your comments down below. What is your favourite map from Heat and why? By all means, check out the Patreon if you want to help support the channel. But by all means, subscribe to it if you can't do that. Either way, I get more views and engagement, and it helps keep this channel going. And until next time, remember, regardless of how many players you dare play this with, it's still only a game. So just rev up your engines, get 8 of you on the table, and have some fun. Bye for now.